Hi, everybody, and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. This is our Beach Reads edition. We do this every year. We bring you a list. All of your librarians bring you lists that we have created, and we make them available for you at the library along with a display of books. And this year we had 8 lists, correct?
8 lists.
And there are 4 of us here to talk about our lists and then give you some little hints about the other ones that the other librarians created for us. And we have a new person here with us today. We're very excited to welcome Catherine Walton, who's the newest member of the reference team. And so we're looking forward to many more book buzzes with you, Catherine.
Thank you.
We're going to start today by talking. Each person is going to talk a little bit about their list, and then they're going to move on to talking one of the books that was their favorites. And I think we're going to start with Erin.
Hello. My list this year is sibling stories that will tug at your heartstrings, because I love a good family drama, and I love books that are centered on characters. And the interesting sibling stories are the ones with drama and trauma and deeply flawed characters. As we all know, the happy-go-lucky families rarely make for great reading. They can make for good reading. And all of the books on my list are books that I have read and really enjoyed. So I highly recommend all of them. In these stories, we see jealousy, revenge, compassion, pain, celebration, envy, encouragement, and a lot of love and sacrifice. So hopefully you'll give a sibling story a try.
Do you want to go ahead and talk
my book? Sure.
Yep, go for it.
So my first book, my only book today, is A History of Burning by Janika Oza. It's got a good cover. It's got a beautiful cover, and an interesting note about the cover. The Canadian, UK, and American editions all have different covers, and they're all stunning.
Right.
They're beautiful. So Janika Oza is a Canadian author, and in her debut novel, she tells a fictionalized story of her own family's displacement from India to Africa and ultimately to Toronto. It begins with a young boy named Purbai in India in 1898 and ends in 1992 in Toronto with his descendants. And that just gives you an idea of how much time is covered in the book. Purbai wishes to work to send money to his family and leaves India with the promise of a job, but becomes an indentured laborer building a railroad in East Africa. He never returns to India, but settles in Uganda and marries. And several chapters into the book, we meet not just his kids, but then we're into his grandkids. And that's sort of where the bulk of the story takes place. The family comes of age under the growing dictatorship of Idi Amin. During their time in Uganda, the family sees political unrest, racism, genocide, and ultimately expulsion when they're forced to leave the country with other Asians in 1972. It spans 4 generations, so there's no focus on a single protagonist. It's told from the perspectives of everyone in the family, and some of them we even only meet one time early on when they get their sort of chapter and we get a glimpse into their lives. The story is vast, but because the author's approach is chronological, it helps to make very good sense of how the story is told. There's no flashbacks or jumping around in the timeline. It's very seamless in its telling. And Oza does a good job of keeping readers oriented. I mean, there's a ton of different names in the book, and none of them are familiar. But it somehow isn't hard to recall what place they take in the book.
No, an author's good when they can do that.
Very good. And her prose is evocative, and again, even though there's so much of the story, it's big, but it's so richly detailed, and she's able to give you, like, in each chapter, some of them are quite short, there's just a little arc. It sort of takes you somewhere with each chapter. The first 2 sections of the book are what provide us with the scaffolding for the meatier sibling story that comes in section 3, which is after the family migrates to Canada. There have been lies and secrets, and everyone except for the eldest daughter who has stayed behind to fight moves to Canada. And they are just trying to start over in yet another place, which is sort of like the echoing themes of the book. The author ties this theme together, that starting over, that what the first generations we meet in the book are grappling with, which is competing ideologies, trying to fit into a land that's not their own, understanding where they fit in their own families, are the same things that the kids in the 1990s are grappling with as well when they're in Toronto. From slavery to protesting a dictator to exile, and they're witnessing protests all of their lives from early on in India to the dictatorship of Idi Amin, and then the protests in the 90s around the Rodney King verdict, which is where the story feels similar to when it started. It's just in a modern setting.
Right.
The book has a strong sense of place because, and I think she did this very willfully, to understand displacement of the family, you really have to become a little bit attached to every place that they're in yourself.
Right.
And she does a great job at that.
Right.
It's very character oriented, as any good sibling book should be. It's about, I found myself rooting for this family, and not just to survive, but to thrive. You know, it's happy endings and not happy endings throughout the book.
Is there one character that you kind of focus on towards the end in this last section?
It's really that nuclear family that you focus on toward the end. The kids are the grandchildren of Pirbai, and then his son is Vinod, and that's the father of the children.
Right.
Not specifically, but there are characters that have larger storylines at different parts of the book.
Right.
Do you feel like you want them to find their place? Like by the end,
I want them to find their place, and I want to pick up. I wanted immediately for there to be the next book where I could see what happens to them, and also to their children as they move along. It feels, by the end, you know, it feels like they're very settled in Canada, and I think that's probably understanding that the author's family ultimately settled in Canada, where she has grown up, and so there's a sense of sort of contentment of her place at the end of the book. But yes, I want follow-up. I'm not sure we'll get it. I don't think there will be a follow-up. It's a pretty distinct book in and of itself, and the story is kind of perfect.
Yeah.
But she's a really wonderful writer. She has some short stories, but I think she's going to be a writer to watch.
And you said this mirrors her own family story?
This mirrors her own family story, yeah. But she doesn't call it a memoir. I think there's memoir-like aspects, but in a novel, she's been able to be a bit more free in the storytelling. So that's my book.
Yeah, that sounds like a good summer book, actually. If for somebody who wants to dive in and really like go deep, because not everybody wants light, fluffy stuff in the summertime.
No, and the chapters are short, and it doesn't feel overwhelming to read. Like some family sagas really draw that out, but this one is very, it's very highly readable. Right. And you do get sort of like attached into the story and the characters.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, and now we're going to move from a family drama to some nonfiction.
Yes.
True crime. Catherine is our true crime expert, which is kind of cool to have on the team.
Yep. The title of my list is True Crime. I read a lot of true crime in defense of the choice, and this is a genre that requires a little explanation or defense from time to time. There are good and bad true crime books out there. The bad ones, I consider the ones that lack any empathy for the suffering, the victim's suffering, and feel superficial. The good ones do show sensitivity and don't sensationalize the violence, but they also give depth and context by placing the events of the stories in a wider context of the justice system or problems within society. At least that's what I look for. True crime can be graphic. It's not for everyone, but it's perhaps a broader genre than we might immediately think. It does cover art theft, cryptocurrency crime, financial crimes, espionage. So there's more to it than the murder, which
mass murders,
the mass
killers,
consumption. Yeah, and then of course it can be set in different countries. It can be set in different time periods, and there's books from both of those on the list. So I hope everyone will find something that they enjoy on the list. So the book I would like to talk about is Bad Blood which is written by Wall Street Journal investigative journalist John Carreyrou. It is a book about fraud and deception in Silicon Valley in the dot-com boom of the 2000s. You really get a sense of the bustle of the time, a sense of the manic nature of the valley, billionaires being made overnight, everybody looking for the next big thing, the next big thing in tech. What I liked about it is that vividness, also the detailed depiction of the characters involved, and the detail he includes about what is his own investigation into the story, as it's coming from the horse's mouth, as it were. At the center of the story is Elizabeth Holmes. She is a Stanford dropout, a very enigmatic character. She modeled herself somewhat on Steve Jobs with the black polo. She even dropped her voice an octave or so.
That's worth a YouTube listen. It's wild when you watch it.
Very
Yes.
interesting.
Okay.
She creates this persona for herself that works, and people believe in what she's selling. So yeah, she's enigmatic, but she draws people along with her. It's not exactly a rags to riches story. She is the daughter of an Enron vice president, which perhaps a little hurdle to overcome. She founded a company that she says she used her unused Stanford tuition to found, to develop blood testing technology that she claimed could identify all kinds of different conditions, up to very complex cancers and so on, by testing just a single drop of blood, and it would do it accurately and it would do it quickly, and the device would be mobile. So it really had the potential to revolutionize medicine, and therefore generate billions in profits. So money poured in from many known names, the Walton family of Walmart, Rupert Murdoch, Betsy DeVos. She made deals with high street pharmacies, Walgreens, and so on, and became the youngest female billionaire, I believe, that there had been at one point. Over 1 million tests were done, and medical decisions were made based upon these test results, but nobody had actually checked, and she never offered any evidence that this technology was actually working. So it's quite unbelievable, really. So nobody except those inside the company knew that the tech didn't work, and that, as you can imagine, would have severe consequences for patients. The test results your treatment is based on were not accurate in the first place, then it's very, very dangerous. So she's a fascinating character. The second character is the author himself. He basically starts his investigation from an anonymous tip that he received from a medical professional who didn't think that this tech could possibly work in the way that it was being portrayed. And the book details the story of the company's response. He's threatened, he's followed. It's a very aggressive defense from the company. But he perseveres, and along with 2 whistleblowing employees, he reveals the multiple ways in which Holmes and her partner deceived investors, deceived the public, even their own staff at times. And it's pretty jaw-dropping that they managed to get away with it. So who knows whether Elizabeth Holmes willfully ignored problems with the technology, or whether she was just a true believer and she just kept pushing forwards, which is kind of reflective of Silicon Valley at the time. That kind of oomph was often rewarded, risk-taking or maybe recklessness. Fine line.
Hard to say.
It's amazing to think of the facade that they built
Yes.
to fake it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you really considering when you're reading the book, well, what was she? Who was she? And it's really up to everyone to make up their own.
It's just charismatic in this very weird way.
Yes. Yeah. The book is fast-paced. It reads like a thriller. It's really, really well researched. It's nonfiction that reads like fiction. And as I said earlier, it really gives you the story from the horse's mouth. It's written by the journalist, so you really do get a sense of the process of investigation that the journalist undertakes, which is fascinating to me. And repercussions of the case are going on today. She's still in the news. There are podcasts out there. There's a Netflix drama of this story. But if you wanted to,
she just went to jail two weeks ago or something, right? For her to actually do
That's
her
right.
sentence.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
I think well, not really. It's not in the book. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually not in the book, right?
So so read the book to go straight to the source, and then watch the news to see the repercussions play out.
Yeah.
It was a really well done book. It was. I felt like it had the potential to be dry, and it wasn't at all.
Yes,
it was. The story is much more exciting than you think it would be because it's so wild.
Yeah.
Well, also, like you said, seeing how he did it, I think that would be really fascinating. How he ferreted out everything. Is another layer to it.
Yeah. It's definitely it's a credit to investigative journalists everywhere.
Yeah. Jackie.
Okay, we'll go back to fiction then.
Okay, back to fiction.
But still kind of thrillery. My book, I should say my list first. Yes, my list was called Take Me Away, which feels very beachy and vacation-y, but these books are not. They are more, what they have in common is that they are set very far afield. And it's not so much that they are far, but that the settings that they're in are very, very different from here. And the idea that I was kind of thinking of was that when you read them all, you realize that setting is just a place and that we are all people and people are going through all the same things, just in different places and under different circumstances. But we all have the same problems. Doesn't matter. So this particular book is The Niger Wife by Vanessa Walters. This is her debut novel, though I think she's written 2 young adult books. It's a very good showing, I think, for a debut. It's set in Lagos, Nigeria, which I did not know anything about. Had to do some Google searches about kind of what it was like there. But what you do get a sense from the book and what matched my research is that Lagos is a very kind of up and coming city. It's very vibrant. It's very busy. It's kind of, all of it has kind of this like Times Square feel to it. Lots of lights, very hustle and bustle. The residents live kind of a very fast paced lifestyle, but they're at kind of either end of the extreme ends of the socioeconomic scale. People there are extremely wealthy or they're extremely poor. There's not a ton in the middle. But Lagos is very welcoming to foreigners for reasons I'm not clear on. They just are. Which brings us to The Niger Wife. And the term means, very specifically, it is the foreign-born wife of a native Nigerian man. And there's actually, in real life and in the book, a group of women who just call themselves the Niger Wives. And it is that common a practice that there are many, many women in this group. Like in Lagos alone, there are like 100 or something. It's a lot. It's a big group. So this book has 2 main characters, and the story alternates being told from their perspectives. So we have Nicole, who is Black. She is British born. She is the Niger wife in question. And she has gone missing from Lagos. She has moved there. She moved there 5 years ago with her husband, Nigerian, Tanya, and they are raising their children there. Their children are like 5 and 3 or something. And the other perspective, so she moved there from London to live with his family in their kind of palatial estate. And it is so palatial that she and Tanya have like their own house kind of attached to the main house. I mean, they're huge, huge estates. And the other person is Claudine, and Claudine is Nicole's estranged aunt. And when Nicole goes missing, Claudine flies to Lagos from London to kind of, she doesn't really come there to investigate, but that's sort of what ends up happening, because when she gets there, she feels like Tanya and his family are not really taking her disappearance very seriously. there's this kind of implication that maybe she just ran away and like, well, who knows what she did. But Claudine is not convinced that she would have left the children, that she would have left her children. So she kind of gets a little bit more involved. The story is very nonlinear. It starts with the months before Nicole's disappearance and alternates from her perspective, but from those months before to her childhood, until like when she was meeting Tanya and earlier times in Lagos. And then that goes, you alternate back to Claudine's perspective, which is the present, but then she also has flashbacks to Nicole's childhood when she was raising her. You get bits of her own childhood. She was raised partially in Barbados, I believe, or Jamaica, an island, and then came to London like as a younger child.
And does she handle those shifts well?
She handles the shifts well. It's very clear where you are in the narrative. You're never kind of wondering where you are, but they do go back and forth. But the chapters are kind of short, and so you don't get bogged down in one timeline. Right. You're moving around enough, and it's very clear where you are. But so she's going back. Claudine's kind of gets back into why they are estranged, what happened to their relationship. It's a very well-paced book. It's a page turner without being like action-packed. Right. It's not like constantly things are happening, but she does an excellent job really building suspense. I thought.
Is it a psychological thriller, or is it thriller too strong a word for it?
It is a thriller. Gentle's not the right word. It's a slower thriller.
Character-oriented thriller.
It's very character-oriented. Right. Yes. So psychological is good. It's not quite
without
that.
Being like Girl on the Train.
It's not Girl on the Train. It's not Gone Girl. It's not quite that far. Yeah. But she builds this nice parallel between Claudine and Nicole, where as the book progresses, you see them both becoming really disillusioned, kind of with Tanya, with the husband. They both kind of come to a place where they're like, I don't know about him. And then with his family, with this wealthy lifestyle that looks really good from the outside, and then when you're in it, it's not quite as shiny as you would think. They both become really disillusioned with Lagos, with the town, with the city, with the country, with the culture is very different from England. The gender roles are different. There's very much a family hierarchy that is not quite the same. They both kind of don't appreciate. While the prose is very serviceable, but her dialogue is excellent. It's like really kind of oddly witty and funny at times. Claudine's voice is really well done. It's really she's very sharp and no nonsense, and it comes through really quick. Like there's not tons of dialogue, but when it's there, it matters. It counts. She makes it count. So while the culture and the settings and everything kind of takes you away, it really does remind you that, again, we're all just people. We like rich, poor, your love life, all your life. It's all complicated, and it doesn't matter. Like the setting is sort of what makes this book different. Right. But the story's been told. It could have happened anywhere.
Yeah. I can't wait to read it.
And it has a very surprising ending. I'm always the first to admit I am not I do not ever guess the endings to anything. I never see anything coming. But this one was really out of left field, and the reviews actually concurred. The ending is just like, oh, all right. So just for that, give it a swirl.
Yeah, if you like a good twist.
This was also a Good Morning America book club book, which I realized later after I put my list together that like half of my books are, which I just guess I was in a place. I don't know, Good Morning America place.
Something in common.
Whoever picks their books, I guess I'm simpatico.
Yeah.
So that was The Niger Wife.
Yeah, that seems like a good take me away book. Definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. My list this year will not surprise anybody because guess what? It's short books that pack a punch. I do it a lot. I just really like short things in general, whether it's short stories or poetry or most of these are novellas. I think they're all under 288 pages. I think there's two on there that's the longest they get. And some of them are really short, very short, like in the hundreds, in the low hundreds even. And they're on a variety of subjects, and you can take what you want from it. The one I want to talk about today is it's called Tread of Angels by Rebecca Bronhorst, and it's a real kind of tiny tour de force. I don't have it with me today, but you'll see it on the screen. It's only about that big, and it's black, and it has a sort of, I don't know, a little bit of a fantasy feel, the front of it, but it's kind of, at its heart, it's kind of a detective story mixed with a little bit of a morality tale, but it's also really action-packed. You jump right in, and it just takes you right to the last page, which is something like 160, so it's not very long. I think the thing I love most about this book, though, is the setting and the frame of it all. She lets you live in this kind of amazing mashup of a world for that short time, and it feels like the Old West, which is kind of, but not. And there's the first scene is all set in a gambling house, and there's you're kind of panning around the room almost cinematically, and you see all these different characters, and they're all kind of dressed in slightly funky stuff. And then there's the backdrop. Later in the book, you see the backdrop of the mountains where they do a lot of mining. So again, that kind of Westfield. But then the costumes that everybody's wearing and some of the contraptions that appear in the book are very kind of futuristic, don't fit in that Old West, which gives it this sort of steampunk feel. And then there are demons. So there's the fantasy. So the demons in this world long ago had a war with the angels, and they lost. And some of their descendants now populate this place, and they are called the Fallen. I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute. And there are also some religious overtones in this book. Roanhorse comes from a background which kind of, she brings together a whole bunch of religious traditions in her story.
She's a theologian, right?
She actually has a master's in theology from Union Seminary, which is a pretty prestigious place. So she obviously she says herself she has a fascination with religious themes. Mm-hmm. And so you see, there's some Catholic, a lot of the naming and stuff is sort of Catholic, but there are ceremonies that feel like they could be from other traditions. So there's all of that. This is the background that we're setting the story in. And the story briefly is of Celeste, who is kind of our detective, if you want to call her that, in the story. Her father was one of the elect, and as opposed to the fallen, who I mentioned earlier, right? The fallen who have these distinctive marks around they have golden rings around their eyes and slight horns in their heads. Mm-hmm. But because her mother was fallen and her father was elect, but Celeste doesn't have those telltale signs, so she can pass for elect. She has lived most of her life with her father. And the thing that happens at the very beginning is that Marielle, her sister, who does appear as fallen, she does look like a fallen, is hauled off for the grisly murder of a guy in the rooms above the saloon. And she's taken away as the prime suspect. And Celeste, who's always felt kind of guilty that she was the one who could pass and that her sister had to stay with the fallen in this world, she feels a duty to go and solve her sister's this crime that she doesn't believe her sister is guilty of. She has 2 days, basically. There's a trial in 2 days, and for the most part, the fallen do not survive these things. If they're accused of murder, they're going to end up dying. So she enlists the help of some of her friends in the fallen community, as well as some members of the elect establishment, and also her ex-demon lover. So there's a little kind of love thing there. And it doesn't go very well for her. She's sure she's going to prove her is innocent in her 2 days, but she's actually foiled at every turn. And maybe that's where the kind of morality tale comes in, this feeling that instead of Celeste saving her sister, she actually has to kind of save herself and figure out some stuff about herself. So that's the arc of that story. Just in case anybody is interested in this, I mean, I think this is a really great little taster. Catherine, you read it, didn't you?
I did. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. There's
Yeah.
so much there, as you described,
Yeah.
in such a small book.
Yeah.
So to be able to portray this world without pages and pages and pages of explaining and description,
She does an
is
amazing job.
Quite the talent.
Yeah. And so, and it's simple and accessible too. It's
Yes.
not like,
It's
it's not deep and heavy in any
easy.
way. It feels kind of, it does actually feel kind of beach ready, actually. It's
Mhm.
kind of light in its tone,
Mhm.
or not light, but it's accessible. You know, it's an easy read. She's written a couple of other things. If you did taste that and like it, she has a duology called, I don't actually know what the whole thing is called, but the first book is called Black Sun, and the second one is called Fevered Star. And I would say the worlds in that are a little bit similar to the one that you get in Tread of Angels. And so if you like that one, you probably would like those. And then she's also written the Six World series, which starts with A Trail of Lightning. And that's, again, if you like the Western setting of this one, you might kind of like that, because it's all set on it's in a sort of, I think, post-apocalyptic world where it's actually set on the Navajo reservation, as was. And it focuses on a monster hunter called Maggie. But there's a couple of books in that series as well. So more from Rebecca Roanhorse if you're interested.
Sounds like she's taken the common theme of good and evil and redemption and made it so interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
'cause they're not all, sometimes it's just a little too on the nose.
Right. She doesn't hit you over the head.
Yeah.
She makes adventure stories
Yeah.
out of it, and that's why
world
they have that
buildings.
kind of slightly old-fashioned morality. It's almost like a
Fable or
yeah, or
Yeah.
something you'd see on the stage, like a British pantomime or something, like where
Yeah.
there's kind of a moral to it, but really it's just a good adventure story, or
Yeah.
like a good kids movie
I was
almost.
going to say, I mean, it sounds almost made for the screen, doesn't it?
It
Sounds
does.
like it would be
I
a
wonder if
fabulous
at some point.
movie or
Yeah.
series. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
So I'm just, in the little time that we have left, which is very little actually, I'm going to just give you a quick idea of some of the other lists that we have. Megan did a great one of a whole bunch of mysteries for those of you who like to read mysteries in the summer. All of these are first in a series mystery books that all have ones that are about to come out. I think most of them have a new one in the series that's about to come out. So you can start here, or this is a little bit of an alert to tell you when your next favorite is coming on that series list. Beth did something about forthcoming fiction, as she often does. So you'll find a lot of books. Not all of her books will be on display yet when you come to the library, but you can take away this list or find it online. I should point out it is available on the website. All of these lists are there. If you head to the little under summer 2023, you'll see in the menu, you will see something called Beach Reads, and you can click there and see all of these lists. So Beth is one you might want to hold on to because things will be coming out soon. Amanda did a Tales of Things Curiouser and Curiouser, Strange Tales to Evoke Wonder, and there are some amazingly strange ones
and
on there, including quite a few graphic novels, which is always great to have recommendations for. And then who am I thinking? Casey. Casey is the last one, and she did, these are mostly YA, or they were all YA? I think they were all YA. So young adult books that she felt would make good media. So they were tales that could easily be turned into TV series or movies. And she gives you a little hint about, in each one of hers, about why she thinks they would make a good movie or TV series. So lots and lots of variety there for you to come and choose at the library. Again, the display is just as you walk in the front door, and the lists are also available on the website with links that take you straight into the catalog, so you can place a hold and then just come pick up your library book. So we hope we'll see you at the library to pick some of these up. And if you need any other suggestions, you can always visit us at the reference desk. And for now, that is Beach Reads, and we will see you next season in the fall when we come back with the next edition of Book Buzz. Thanks a lot.